Hello, everybody. How's it going? My name is Cameron Dennis, president and founder of the Blockchain Acceleration Foundation. I'm here with some amazing speakers today to talk about digital collectibles and liquid IP. And sorry if I interrupted any conversations that were happening. Just thought that table was full and I might as well get started. But Ayush, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and then have the speakers introduce themselves. And one last thing, Emilio, if you don't mind turning on your mic and camera, that is how you come up on stage. But talk to you guys after.
Thanks, Cameron. Thank you so much. So everyone joining in, welcome to the panel, Digital Collectibles and Liquid IP, hosted by BAF, the Blockchain Acceleration Foundation, and Blockchain at Berkeley, which is Blockchain at Berkeley, BAB. So who am I? I am Ayush Agarwal. I am the current co-president of Blockchain at Berkeley, third-year student at UC Berkeley, studying electrical engineering and computer science. So it's absolutely fantastic to meet you all. And I'm here joined together with some amazing, amazing folks. Super excited to get to talk to them, pick their brains about NFTs, reveal some nice secrets about the collectible landscape for y'all, the audience. So if you want to check out Blockchain at Berkeley, just head to blockchain.berkeley.edu and you'll check out all of the projects that we do, all of the open source educational content that we have. If you want to dive deep into blockchain fundamentals, blockchain development on Ethereum, and other things as well, you can check it out all on our website. So head over there if you're interested in us. But that is my introduction for my team, and I'm very happy to host these wonderful people here today. So why don't we come here and get started, and start with Casimir. Why don't you give yourself an introduction?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
All right. Yeah, my name's Casimir. I am the founder of Nifty Co. We produce the platform Sneaker Cred for digital sneakers for sneakerheads on the blockchain for Ethereum. And I'm just, I guess, launching out a new platform called Trap Chain, whereby which we're leveraging non-fungible tokens and music playlists.
Oh, very cool. I have to hear more about that during the panel. And next, let's head over to Emilio.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ayush. I appreciate the invitation to speak on an exciting topic, with some incredible contemporaries in the space. My name is Emilio Cazares. I'm an intellectual property attorney, primarily specializing in copyright, patent, and trademark licensing and prosecution. I was originally introduced to cryptocurrency in my first year as a law student, which made it pretty difficult to focus on class, just watching the candles and whatnot. But it wasn't beyond until I really started to dive into the technology, where the intersection of law and cryptocurrencies started to make a lot of sense. Done a lot of reading and scholarship in the Lex Cryptographia space, the whole idea of code being law as kind of like an intangible and somewhat abstract conception of law in cryptocurrency. But it wasn't until I started to discover NFTs, which I believe and have kind of long theorized had always been the best value proposition for digital assets, at least in terms of a use case, just because as far as the law is concerned, applying the law to a digital medium is a lot easier than applying law to the real world. For example, like a traffic light is a rule, but it doesn't enforce anything. And now we kind of have that opportunity to enforce legal prescriptions on NFTs. So I've been doing some work in the space. I was formerly at a firm called Shepherd Mullen, but recently decided to venture on my own, to start my own practice dedicated to NFT transactions and all things related to cryptocurrency. Thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Emilio. And there might be a Wi-Fi issue. Just give it 1 second. Hey, Devin, you hear me? Yeah, I can see you. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of delay with turning off and on the mic, or something's going on. My Wi-Fi might be in and out. Maybe that's the issue. But yeah, thanks for having me, Ayush. Really excited to be here. And Casimir, good to see you again. great to be you know, in a place with all sorts of people who are doing interesting things on NFTs. Yeah, my name is Devin. I'm one of the founders of OpenSea, which is a marketplace for non-fungible tokens. We allow you to buy and sell things like crypto game items, domain names, digital art, all sorts of really awesome stuff. And the space has definitely been growing a ton, even just over the last couple of months. It's really gone from, you know, kind of underground, or maybe not fully underground, but pretty small space to now something that a lot of people are starting to really care about, and that's exciting. So yeah, that's me.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you all for the amazing introductions. Audience, as you can see, our panel today is absolutely stacked, so we're in for a great conversation. The format, how this is going to go, is I have a couple questions prepared myself that I was curious to hear about, and throughout this, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A section in the panel, and I will ask some of your questions. So let's hop right into it. So talking about NFTs, crazy ecosystem, really radical, awesome concept. I think one place where we can start this discussion is the history of how this has evolved. So the first open question to the group is, how do you think that the ecosystem for NFTs has evolved since 2017?
I can start, assuming people can hear me.
Yeah, sure. And then we can go.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, one trend the tooling around Ethereum has gotten a lot better. So MetaMask has improved a lot. There's now a dozen other wallets you can use. There's just so much more tooling available. There's now lots of good developer tools for building and deploying smart contracts. It's easier than ever to deploy an NFT. You don't even have to be a developer. You could just go and create one through various different platforms that allow minting. So I think just, part of it is the space has just gotten a lot easier to, there's just a lot more you can do. And now there's hundreds of different projects that are available for browsing, searching, and buying and selling. So that's one thing. I think then there's also been a bit of a shift from kind of gaming, which CryptoKitties was, kind of a game, a very collectible game, but it had some game mechanics associated with it, to supporting gaming as well, but also just this sort of pure digital art use case where it's a lot simpler. All you do is you just tokenize an asset, and then you go and sell it. And I think what's interesting about that is it's just so simple that digital artists use cases kind of led to a real virtuous cycle that's kind of accelerated the space forward.
Yeah, most definitely. This technology has really opened things up for artists. And Casimir, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I remember in 2017 when there was just very few Medium blog posts about, various different, ERC standards like ERC 721, 998, and you had to scavenge through these disparate Discord channels and find people on Twitter. I mean, the Twitter sphere is still pretty, much the NFT space, but last year, the past couple of years, as we were building out Sneaker Cred, we had to do a lot of hacking to get our application together, and hopefully the folks at OpenSea have realized this and created such a great package for beginners and for folks who are new to the space, who aren't, blockchain engineers and, aren't certified smart contract architects like myself.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Tooling has improved all over the place. And I think that's really important to enable artists to do what they do.
Yeah, I'd like to echo everyone's thoughts in terms of the evolution of the space. It's interesting to see, what I guess can be described as a novelty of NFTs in the early era, kind of more of a marvel at the technological proposition than perhaps any actually like a creative content that would go into it. But then now we've obviously seen the explosion of creativity and the explosion of these types of peer-to-peer interactions, which are going to be, incredibly exacerbated by the state of the world right now, and where kind of like the idea where people can profit off themselves, and through the evolution of social tokens commodify their art and reputation. It's really interesting to see that user focused type of evolution around NFTs. On the more technological side, I think what's particularly interesting and compelling is I guess like the on-chain movement, right? Like people kind of question the value of an NFT that references a resource identifier that's essentially only backed up by one server somewhere in the world, or two, or maybe a scattershot handful. But that redundancy and persistency that I think is really the backbone of blockchain technology is starting to get its way into multimedia through NFTs, which is a pretty compelling example, especially if the industry wants to develop any cohesive licensing frameworks on top of the NFT ecosystem. So I feel like we're in this phase where we're gearing up for those second order types of transactions. In terms of experience alone, what I've really enjoyed seeing in this space is just the integration of tech and art experience and NFTs. People are starting to toss in all types of clues and riddles and functionalities to these NFTs that actually augment the artistic experience, whether that's a digital experience purely or a physical experience, for example, like a sculpture or a mural that has some type of augmentation that is controlled by the owner of the NFT. So you're seeing a lot of experimentation and tricks with the tech behind NFTs that I think is really where the value proposition of digital art is the strongest, where you kind of have an unlimited source of experience through an NFT and a direct connection between owner and artist. So it's great to see that trend continue.
That's very cool. I mean, that's a great point. Like the fact that when you have a collectible NFT, the fact that it's backed by code on a smart contract means that the possibilities really are endless. And I think a good example of this is with CryptoKitties. You were actually able to compose games on top of the native CryptoKitty asset. And Dapper Labs has created the whole Kittyverse out of this concept. Because it's like Pokemon, like how that used to be. But now you can bring your Pokemon outside the original game and play other games with the kitties that you actually own. So that composability aspect of blockchain really is really beautiful, and it shows up here in a very nice way. And the same thing applies to other things in blockchain like DeFi and even some L1 things. So that's a great point. So you mentioned something, Emilio, about how some NFTs, the way that they're designed, is that they have basically their ID on chain, and they point to some URL or some reference that contains the actual metadata for that NFT. So I was going to ask about this actually. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of like a fully decentralized NFT, where the actual metadata either lives on chain or on some other decentralized service like IPFS?
Well, I'll say that quickly from like a technical advantage as well as like a value proposition advantage. A technical advantage being that if something is stored on chain, presumably you're able to reconstruct the image or reconstruct the file or whatever the content is that you're after. You're supposed to be able to reconstruct and compile that completely on the blockchain. I mean, that the blockchain is actually going to process those transactions. So as one could imagine, it's more costly to design smart contracts that actually can deal with vector graphics in the way that requires. And then you have like on-chain kind of, which is where like a service like Arweave, where it's supposed to store a file in an on-chain way, but you can still identify that resource just in the metadata of the NFT. And then you have like the least on-chain, where the metadata of the NFT is just going to identify some presumably hosted content that is presumably hosted by the people who issued the NFT or the service. It's kind of unclear to like the common person. So the advantages are, I guess, the most obvious being the persistency. Like, how long is this art going to survive? If I'm going to pay 10 Ether for something and it disappears and I can't find it, that's obviously an issue. From a value proposition, I think that the NFTs that are really experimenting with the on-chain art have historical relevance in a collectible sense that I think people find interesting and valuable down the road. Like, I mean, take CryptoPunks, for example, being kind of, a technological achievement. So it creates value in that way. So there's like collectible value as well as technical value to it.
That's a very interesting take. Awesome. So one thing to also touch on here is NFTs as a wrapper for artistic pieces, I think is the most intuitive use case for an NFT. But some people have been asking in the chat, and I myself am also curious, are there other use cases for NFTs that you feel that have not been explored? Other edge cases for NFTs that aren't NFT art that could be supported and could utilize the smart contract
Take that. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My mic still says it's muted. So did everyone else lose Emilio, or was it?
Yeah, Emilio's gone. He'll be back.
So yeah, I think there's so many other use cases, and one thing to note is that it's not like art is the only one that's been explored. We've had games, we've had domain names, we've had event tickets on blockchain. Now some of them are like less explored than other things, right? So art, I would say art and gaming are the most explored at the moment, but there's still so much more exploration to be done in both of those territories. In the gaming space, we've really only scratched the surface. Oh, can you hear me or no?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just checking the audience.
Okay. So on the gaming side, like really the games that have launched are pretty, they're awesome, but they're pretty isolated. Like you have the game, you have the asset, marketplace, currency associated with it. But like, the dream of blockchain gaming was like, hey Fanny, was that these games would sort of be interoperable, right? That you could have games like, use assets from other games inside of their game. And there's a little bit of that happening, but I think we've really only scratched the surface of what can be done in the gaming space. There's just so much cool stuff that you can do when you have like this sort of native API for digital assets. And then just to ramble on a little bit longer, I think some cool ideas that we've seen like early instances of, but we really haven't seen done in a big way, include event tickets. I think that's huge, right? We can't buy an event ticket yet. I guess there's not much of a need for event tickets, at least in the real world these days, but maybe like a virtual event, right? So that's, there've been a couple experiments, but I think we've really only scratched the surface. Physical assets, so basically tokenizing a physical asset, allowing it to be traded digitally and then redeemed for the actual physical item. There's been a few projects doing like wine and diamonds and things like that, but it's really, really early. And what else? Like courses, subscriptions, really anything digital. Oh, maybe another territory is like taking a centralized digital asset and sort of escrowing it, turning it into an NFT and allowing it to be traded. So imagine like you could sort of escrow your Fortnite items inside of the Fortnite account, and then they could be tokenized, and that's another kind of ripe territory. So for people who are building the space, I think there's just so much underexplored and unexplored stuff. And now what's cool is there's a market out there that's looking to get involved in this stuff. It's maybe 20 to 30 times bigger than it was 5 months ago, right? So it's a perfect time to start building cool NFT projects.
For sure.
Yeah, I was interested in tokenizing land. I bought about an acre of land in Northern California, and I wanted to tokenize that with house communities and create a system for, well, this is pre-COVID, but a music festival. So, the ticketing system would be applicable to, the folks who come to the festival and so forth. And I think it's an interesting use case of what I coin as REIT NFTs. It's a new exotic instrument whereby which you can trade shares of land in a REIT.
That's cool. That is a vision. I see that vision. One thing I also wanted to follow up on, Devin, you mentioned, or so Devin mentioned physical items connected to an NFT. And I know, Casimir, you were saying that you're about to drop a real life sneaker. So tell us more about that, if you can.
Over the past year, we have been working pretty, I guess, like fiercely on putting together something that would be a cool digital to physical asset. So, you know, working towards the idea of merging from, well, coming out of the metaverse and into the physical world with something that, you know, is a tangible NFT mirrored object, right? So the idea is just essentially you have a 3D model of a sneaker, or this particular case, it's a cyberpunk boot.
Fire.
Based off of the game Cyberpunk. So it's like crypto cyberpunk kicks. And you're able to not only be able to 3D print that sneaker, but you can also use it within gaming. So I'm working with some folks now for AR, VR integrations, and also some geofence location-based specific events ticketing around that NFT issue as well.
That's so cool. So I think a theme here is that we're now entering the possibility with NFTs to be able to bridge so many things that we didn't even think was possible before, whether it be items from multiple games that are created by different publishers, like Fortnite bridging with a Steam game, or even using things like your actual physical location. It can all be done because of the code that lives behind each of these NFTs, which is quite a beautiful concept. Something else, so kind of coming back to the art aspect of it, one thing I was thinking about, and some people in the audience are curious about this as well, is if you are a new artist, whether you're a musician or an artist, like a pictorial artist, how do you go about putting your art on a blockchain in an NFT? What's the easiest path to do that?
I can go ahead and take this. I mean, the easiest path to do that would be to use any of the platforms that have open minting available. So something like Rarible or Mintable, like you can just get on there and mint on OpenSea as well. Of course, you can just get on there and mint. The market, in terms of like the fine art market that is developing, and I roll my eyes to some extent just because it's tough, I guess, to discern the value between certain artists. Like certain types of platforms are only application based only. So Super Rare, Maker's Place, Known Origin, places like that, where you have to submit some type of application and go through that curation process, which is in the interest of the platforms themselves, because they want a lot of value to flow from their smart contracts, and they don't want to be uncertain about who's allowed to use that smart contract. So there's been kind of a curation scheme that's been employed on top of the NFT space, but there are open areas available where the markets, you know, are still pretty hot. In terms of like starting off as an early NFT artist, I think, you know, it's really important to build a narrative in this space, because, you know, there's like a lot of opinions in the scene, and people that are good at art but just coming to the scene are kind of seen as like naive and ignorant to blockchain. So are they supposed to be in this crypto art world that's just designed for crypto artists? So there's kind of like some tension in the reputation mechanics in this marketplace. So I think any artist is well suited to build a narrative as to their interest in decentralization and kind of like this new digital renaissance that is occurring. But at the same time, it's like a lot of times in this space, a narrative is built by mystery in itself. So I feel like you got to be yourself, and if you're anyone other than yourself, you're wasting your time. And don't try to do too many money grabs too quick. That's that's my advice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I was going to add, well, actually, first, before I address that, I wanted to address a pretty pressing question in the Q&A, which is, can I tokenize my dog? I would say, yes, you could. You could go to one of two paths. One is you could try to turn it into a fungible asset where you take an ERC20 and then you have sort of the ERC20 represent shares in your dog, and then the success of, you know, how successful your dog is over time sort of would drive the value of those ERC20s. Or you could create one single NFT that represented your dog, and if you purchase that, then you would receive the dog and they would sort of over time. But in terms of the question around like making a name for yourself in the art space, I think like I totally agree. I think the one really important thing is, is that a security? Yeah, it would depend. So if you sufficiently decentralize the distribution of the token, then I think you could potentially, you know, avoid the Howey test with that. So yeah, I think like the question of scarcity is really interesting, right? Like I think we're seeing a massive, like, because it's so easy to mint now, it really is easy to mint. Even on like OpenSea, you actually mint for free, and the buyer will pay the gas price. It's now like easier than ever to create an NFT. It's expensive to move an NFT around still because it's Ethereum, but what we're seeing is like there's a kind of a flood of supply, and I think, you know, it's going to be really important for platforms to kind of do more sort of display of like how rare is this thing actually, like where did it come from, what is there an enforcement around like the total number of these things that will be issued. I think, you know, first we'll see kind of the explosion of supply, which we're already seeing, and then we'll see kind of like more of a curation layer from like various applications, as Emilio said. So I would definitely keep that in mind. But you know, what's cool about NFTs now is you can really go and try these things out. You can really easily create an NFT and put it on sale. It's really not, I mean, it involves a little bit of crypto, like getting a MetaMask, all these things, but it doesn't require any sort of development skills.
For sure. And on that note about the curation that's going to form because of this demand or increase in supply, how do you think that will coexist with the decentralized ideology behind this space? Well, how do we avoid what happened to the music industry, where the curators and the record labels kind of monopolized all of the power of what is hot and what isn't?
Well, I think, you know, myself personally, I'm taking an educational stance. It's a lot of folks who are interested in this. They're coming in from the music industry and they're trying to wrap their heads around it. And so I've offered myself as a resource. I've basically been doing these free 30-minute deep dives into NFTs and the different marketplaces and platforms and the various different smart contract standards. And ultimately, I think that there needs to be a decentralization of the recording academy. I think that, you know, some of these things can be coexisted as a DAO, and it could be, you know, artist-run cooperative, and essentially, you know, there could be some type of a composable NFT element whereby which, you know, a artist or bands or groups, you know, audience or fan base could collectively own into, you know, the production of their masters or the collective body of work or that catalog of artists. And yeah, decentralization is key. I think that, you know, giving that value back to the artists, where it has traditionally been, you know, seeped out by middle managers and rent-seeking agents and so forth. It's this time of the Renaissance where all these toolkits and frameworks are out to exist, but I think there's definitely needs to be a translation in culture, and there needs to be a you know, a cultural bridge, specifically to folks from, you know, underrepresented communities that some things like gas and other costs are pretty much prohibitive to interest in the space. So yeah, one of my suggestions was to come up with a treasury for folks that are new to the space in order to help them set up these different I guess platforms and storefronts on these various different marketplaces.
And tell us more about TrapChain. How does that play into this kind of vision?
Right. So I think that us being in blockchain and in the space, right, like a lot of these terms and vernacular vocabulary are just second nature, right? But for the common person, the common man, you know, it's Mandarin, unless you speak Mandarin. But if you don't, it's quite confusing, and it's a lot to wrap your head around because, you know, the centralized web as it exists today is, you know, quite contrarian to the way that we think and feel and operate in Web3. So, just like there's a distro kit for, all the different various streaming services and delivery services, I'm basically an artist sherper that's sherpering artists to the various different platforms. So TrapChain exists as an interoperability layer for NFTs across other blockchains and layer 2 protocols, such as Matic or Polygon, Cosmos. They have a NFT SDK and also a media SDK. Polkadot has Kusama and another substrate. And there's various other different ways and bridges for music artists or visual collaborations that will probably need to leverage a much higher throughput for the delivery of that type of a streaming service, and also higher volume of storage of content delivery.
Very cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Emilio?
Sure, yeah. So the original question being kind of like, how to avoid the scenario like in the music industry where you have these effective aggregators that are able to extract rent from an entire market through a subscription model, because the market doesn't have enough information or the means to have direct access to streamed content, because that would require a license to every single thing that you want to access, which is prohibitive in most cases, because if I want a license to Bruno Mars, I got to go through Sony, right? It's just like they have so much power because they've been in the position where it's more efficient for the market to license as a whole. Now, how we avoid that situation, I think, is a pretty complex type of solution, one that at least it involves some social forces of decentralization and some community enhanced efforts like what Casimir is talking about in terms of like decentralizing capital and providing capital to people who need it in a transparent way. So there's that. But there's also, I think, what the like infrastructure of NFTs are right now, and aggregators like OpenSea and others kind of like have on their hands is like an analytics and market mechanics problem, or I should say opportunity rather, where, if you can create more modular market mechanics where I can, commission my works to people that I don't even know, or I can send like a group of works to be tokenized and sold on an open market with relatively low cost, but I can rely on people more experienced than myself to be a counterparty to those types of transactions in terms of actually like distributing works. Then you can get into a scenario where people can distribute and disseminate their works on a peer-to-peer market with modular market mechanics that work in a deterministic way, like as we know, be an advantage of blockchain. So I think that like as those market mechanics become more modular, where people can enter into complex royalty sharing agreements or profit sharing agreements or complex type of agreements that would ordinarily require like arm's length contracting between two companies or two entities, I think that like cost is going to go radically down as this technology improves. And then kind of on top of that, more like on the analytical side of things, is just increasing the market efficiency in NFTs, trying to reduce the a price discovery, so that if value is being created by an artist, the market is more tuned to trying to find it. And I think that the way that is achieved is kind of a combination of standardization, trying to identify like which characteristics of NFTs do we care about, and what type of like analytics on NFTs are we going to possibly associate with the NFTs themselves. So pricing algorithms can be based on numbers that are achieved in a decentralized sense, as opposed to what is more akin to like a speculative market, which is what we have now. So standardization in market mechanics and in data analytics and aggregating data, I think will have a big effect in terms of like trying to improve the condition of the bedroom artist who now just has an infinite market beyond their computer screen, where that wasn't the case before.
Very cool. As a bedroom artist myself, that's good to hear.
Amelia, what are your thoughts on ERC 1538 for royalties?
Is that the one where you can just essentially split split the royalties between individual people.
Yeah, how do you see user experience being delivered with that protocol?
Well, it's funny that you should ask that. Like, just because in general, like, you know, you have these types of royalty mechanics where they're supposed to be like, you know, like you essentially just put in all the people that are deserving of royalties, right?
Right, exactly. Like, say for instance, there's a freestyle session, and you know they mint it to the blockchain, and it's 15 people on there. Like, is there like, you know, some type of a multi-sig or a shared wallet that it's predetermined, the smart contract, who gets what percentage?
Yeah, it ultimately, like, I'm coming from like a contractual sense, like on the legal side, and in order for anyone to forfeit their copyright interest, there has to be an agreement in writing. So like when I see those types of standards at play, and it's really exciting and cool because you can start to identify the people who deserve the reward, and the person who receives that reward doesn't have to monitor that transaction. They just, you know, obtain it in real time moving forward. But like, I kind of question, or at least I get concerned about the fact of like how these current platforms are going to start just inserting themselves into those slots on the back end. And it's just kind of going to be kind of a condition that like, oh, like if you meant this, like we're going to obtain a royalty according to this complex scheme. And they're identified there on the blockchain without any type of like,
Well, what are the ethics, you know, I said, what are the ethics behind this? Because, you know, for certain execution of this, unless there's some type of UI solution, there will need to be some sort of, you know, hand holding for this type of implementation.
Yeah, I agree. Because like I was saying, the cost of contracting or at least enforcing agreements is going to go far, far down because people that are entitled to a royalty don't have to do anything as long as the NFT is being sold on the markets where the royalty applies. But yeah, I foresee that the aggregators are going to start to like punch themselves in and obtain that slot, and again start to kind of extract a tax essentially from marketplaces. I would like to see more transparency in the actual contracting itself of NFTs. So what I would like to see is NFTs start to identify written semantic agreements that also have a signature or an on-chain attestation that kind of confirms that like the scope of this technical scheme is consistent with our like brain understanding, our verbal understanding. And I think that's the way it's going to go, but it'll take time.
How do you think that, you know, that split share, if there was to be one, what would be like the ethical, you know, percentage?
I think NFTs should be treated as a copyright license. So, and I think a license should operate as a bearer asset in terms of like, as it changes hand, the scope of the license changes hands. The only ethics in terms that I can like think of right now on the spot is just like an issue of notice, just that everybody knows what's going on. I think that's kind of like the biggest issue that can get easily obscured, especially as the mania increases and people are diving into NFTs without true understanding. But you know, we could probably have another 5-hour conversation about that. But I think the notice issue is a big one.
Very interesting, and I think that's a good point. Like, the more we build infrastructure for the actual low-level mechanics of transferring NFTs and interfacing them with things in the real world, there has to be more work done on the data aggregation layer so that things like notices can happen, and more insights can be derived as to how the markets are working and what's going on underneath the hood. So, yeah, go ahead, Casper.
Oh, it just made me think of you know, another use case for social identity, and you know, maybe having something within your wallet, social identity NFT badge that maybe, you know, has, you know, your list of IP and, you know, what you tend to agree to in particular certain aspects of contracts, like maybe a standardized contract for transacting with you. That could even be, you know, part of some type of like aggregators pool, whereby which, you know, people can either opt in or, you know, they can self-select based upon a certain UI for their social identity.
Yeah, that's a good intersection too. I think that's been deeply explored. by enterprises even of how blockchain can power identity. And once we have more people educated about this technology and kind of familiar with using things like a wallet, that will be secondhand to artists who want to protect their rights and their ownership of the things that they create. So something that's on my mind. You guys have all seen this space evolve since 2017, and maybe even earlier than that. So after so much time looking at different NFTs being created and the market being flooded, what do you think drives the value of an NFT besides its scarcity on the blockchain? What is special about this space that makes NFTs valuable, in your opinion?
Well, I think there's not one answer. I think there's just a lot of things that make something valuable. And at the end of the day, something is valuable because people value it, right? So, people talk about, why would someone ever buy a fancy car? And, some people just don't care, right? Some people don't want fancy things. Other people do. It's all a very subjective thing. And so, the art world is like where you see this the most, right? It's you're not buying physical raw materials, you're not buying things that have inherent utility, but people are just valuing them based on some combination of provenance of the item and the history and the story behind it. So I think we'll see the full spectrum in the NFT space. We'll see things that are inherently useful, right? Buying you can even buy food as an NFT and then have it shipped to you. That's obviously valuable. An event ticket is kind of pretty clearly valuable for entertainment purposes. But then on the other side of things, like things that are really only valuable because there's the provenance associated with the person who created it, or there's a story behind it, and that's the reason they're valuable. I think if you look at CryptoPunks, there's this really for folks who aren't familiar with CryptoPunks, it was pretty much the first non-fungible token project on Ethereum. And there were 10,000 CryptoPunks that were released, and they've sort of become the first digital antique. Now they sell for often hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's this really unique story around them. And of course, there's the scarcity. So that combination of being the first, being so scarce, has really kind of led to this cultural phenomenon where people really value these assets. They're putting them in their Twitter profile pictures, and all sorts of interesting things are happening around them. So yeah, I think there's not one answer, and it's almost it's kind of like as simple as the fact that all sorts of things are there can be markets for all sorts of things, right? And the end value is really just something that is determined by the market.
I'd like to add that seeing the reaction of people in bidding wars is during our first drop for the Ethereum sneaker, there was a Boston Celtics sneaker cred that thought she was like our executive assistant at Insight, and she really wanted it so much that she had asked her fiance to buy it for her, but then he had to go to Coinbase, buy some Ethereum, wait for it to get to his wallet, transfer it to MetaMask. And during that time, it was a bidding war between, I think it was like Myrats, Jimmy Eve, and Blander. And it ended up getting sold, and she just like cried, kicked her feet on the floor. But it was so wild, like seeing it in real action. It was just like this feeling, this energy, this like, I guess, synergy around, people's excitement for different projects, and or really what motivates them to make that purchase. Because sometimes, user onboarding the first time, it can cause a little bit of friction, but if they're very, very determined, they want that sneaker, they're gonna get it done. So
that's so cool. Wow. Yeah, and that's interesting because I guess scarcity is still ultimately the biggest factor, because the most intuitive benefit that an NFT gives you is being able to prove that something is scarce and real. We don't need Yeezy Busters anymore because we have a blockchain to tell us. that something is legit.
Yeah, but a challenge though, right? Like I could be an artist and mint the same work under 45 different addresses. Now there's 45 of the same works that nobody might not ever know, but the owner of the true work, like, might be disappointed if they find out that forgeries are still occurring, because they still occur, and they do. So you have this implied scarcity through the fact that a unique asset is always known and true in terms of who the owner and who the creator is, but like those unique assets might not be as unique as you think if they're minted elsewhere. So kind of like, I guess to answer your question in terms of like what the value is, and all of my colleagues here said important and correct things in terms of like the abstract and unidentifiable nature of the value, because like it's to a certain extent where assets aren't useful, like outside of the digital game context, for example, and in the art context, it's just that association with the artist. I think that's like the most fundamental way to put it. Like you have aesthetic value, and then you also have association with the artist. But where the long-term value, I think, lies in NFTs in terms of like the artists that are truly experimenting with the technology underlying them, is like capturing the speculative downstream value of a static asset, because the artists are in a position where they can reward future collectors for the same NFTs, or modify experiences for the same NFTs, or augment and add on to works. And they always have that connection with the current collector, which I think is a very powerful concept, where the artist doesn't have to do any discovery. I mean, as long as they mint from the same account, right? Like they don't have to do a discovery on who the downstream owners are. So they have kind of that direct connection with them that can potentially like augment that art experience. And people, I think, are going to start experimenting with that more. And you're going to see people that are going to hoping that, Pac does something cool with his NFTs down the road, which I think has value.
Kanye was the first to do it with his live album release. He didn't like how it sounded on Spotify, so he went back and fixed it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. I mean, Kanye did it without all this technology. So now that you're able to do it explicitly in a very legitimate fashion, then that's definitely something artists should take advantage of down the road. Awesome. So previously we had also talked a little bit about pricing curves, and this kind of relates to the previous question, but how can NFTs include complex pricing schemes and what value can that bring? So one of my friends, Sunny Agarwal, who I'm not related to, because people tell me that all the time, said, he asked on Twitter, and I think he tagged OpenSea. He had asked, let me read his exact tweet so I don't plagiarize him. But he asked, can you buy collections of NFTs? Is there an easy way to sell all the NFTs in a collection on a bonding curve? i.e., every time one is bought, it auto increases the price of all the others in the collection. So, yeah.
Yeah, wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely could. I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like the term NFT it's a great term because it's caught on, and like it's generating momentum around these new blockchain-based digital assets. But at the end of the day, the markets that OpenSea serves are not just non-fungible tokens. We also allow you to trade semi-fungible tokens, meaning like, let's say you have 100 trading cards and they're all roughly the same. They all are kind of like, let's say they're the warlock. What's like a good trading card name? Well, let's say they're all a warlock, right? Or vicious warlock. So you have 100 of those cards. They're all fungible within each other. Like, it doesn't matter if you have. I mean, maybe you care a little bit if it's edition 5 or 10, but maybe in this game it doesn't really matter like which one it is. They're all the same. So right. You could trade that. You could trade those on a bonding curve, right? Very easily. And you can do, and so that's, there's simple stuff like that where you have a semi-fungible asset traded on a bonding curve. Skyweaver is actually exploring this. They're a new blockchain-based trading card game launching soon. So there's that, and then you could also do something more sophisticated, where you had like a bonding curve for like a broad set of NFTs, where like there's some sort of more sophisticated algorithm that figures out like how much is this NFT worth based on its traits. And I haven't seen anyone do that. I think it's pretty interesting. I think my sense is like that type of thing is pretty hard to do on Ethereum at the moment, because if you're truly representing your asset as non-fungible, so each one has a unique identifier, then like transferring them around, having like liquidity pools for when it costs a lot to get them in and a lot to get them out is potentially prohibitive. But I think the answer to the question is yes. And more broadly, I think there's all sorts of sophisticated price discovery mechanisms that are also highly underexplored. So
what are some of those?
Well, I think Harbarker tasks, or Harbarker taxes, or if you're using them for dogs, they would be called Harbarker, but normally they'd be called Harburger taxes. So these are basically a scheme whereby you pay a fixed tax you pay a tax each year that is set based on how much you value the asset, right? So let's say I value the asset at 100 ETH. Well, I have to pay a 10 ETH tax on that every year, and someone can purchase it from me for 100 ETH. So it always has to be on sale. And so, if you didn't have to pay a tax, you wanted to, hold the asset indefinitely, you would just set the price at, really high. But since you're gonna have to pay a tax on it, you kind of have, there's this, like, I haven't read the like proofs of this, but I think there's some kind of idea around that being like a way to incentivize people to efficiently price their assets. And it also deals with, the low velocity of these, or challenges around people kind of squatting on domain names or things like that, right? So that's underexplored. I think, I think about upshot.io. So pricing using prediction markets, or like, I guess, peer predictions. So having people rate how valuable NFTs are and sort of using that. I saw like an interesting project using, gosh, I can't even really remember how it worked, but it was some kind of interesting auction mechanic where there were like appraisals and there were like incentives for people to appraise stuff. I think some of this stuff gets into like the deep theoretical space where, it could be interesting down the road when we have a little more base level liquidity and a little more throughput on chain. But it's certainly like, could be really cool to experiment with one day.
Very, very interesting. And that changes the types of markets that we can even comprehend as as a society. The Harvard taxes are very interesting because I can imagine some kind of games even being created among just on that concept itself, like hold as many of these stones as possible. And it's a challenge to be able to hold all of them because you will eventually run out of money to keep all the prices so high. It's like Monopoly on a blockchain, but you're playing with the entire world instead of just the 4 people there.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think DeFi is an interesting project. They have a community ownership model of like DeFi and NFTs, whereby which you can leverage your Discord community or Telegram community and involve some social aspects to the DeFi way of, I guess, like applying decentralized finance to the tokenized ownership of an NFT.
And this is an interface for DeFi?
Yeah, it's a fairly new project called DeFi.
Right. I'll post it in chat. Cool. So speaking of DeFi also, I think it would be a crime not to mention it, just given how it's so popular these days. How where does the interface lie between NFTs and DeFi as we know it today? Big questions, too big?
I can answer, but I don't know, Amelia, or yeah, I can take it.
Sure.
So, well, I think in some ways that it's already extremely tightly integrated, right? So you can, if you think of DAI, MakerDAO stablecoin as part of DeFi, then you can already buy and sell assets and stablecoins if you want, right? And so that's one piece of DeFi that's already providing immense value to the NFT ecosystem. And then the other thing I would say is, and also not just DAI, but also other currencies, right? You can buy and sell assets in arbitrary ERC20s, denominated arbitrary ERC20s. The other thing that's interesting is there's sort of like these new blockchain-based games that are sort of combining DeFi mechanics with NFT mechanics. I think Hash Masks did this really well. They had they had this token that you kind of like use to set your name on the hash mask, and there's kind of the sophisticated system around how you earn that token. So I think projects that are doing really well kind of combine NFTs and DeFi often, and just they kind of leverage like all the common infrastructure that's out there. There's obviously Uniswap and AMMs for getting your tokens off the ground, and then there's NFT marketplaces for actually trading your NFTs, and kind of combining those two is really powerful. And then just to get people's brains going with some of the other things that people are doing, there's NFTFi, which allows you to create collateralized loans based on NFTs, which is pretty cool experiment. Some people are using it. And what else? There's NFTX.
Exactly in the chat.
Well, there's two actually. There's NFTX and then there's
NFTX, right?
Yeah. So like NFTX, they're sort of the opposite of each other in some ways. NFTX allows you to take an individual NFT and shard it into ERC20s, and then you can trade. Like if you had a really rare CryptoPunk, then you could turn it into shares of it and have like many different owners of it. And then NFTX, I believe, is the opposite, where you have an index fund that is backed by NFTs, right? So you maybe have like a tokenized version of all of the ultra rare CryptoPunks, and that can be traded on an AMM or something like that. And gosh, I feel like there's like maybe a dozen other kind of like things people have been talking about with the intersection of DeFi and NFTs.
Yeah, I definitely well, first I'll say as a trademark attorney, every project having an NFT in the name is like driving me crazy. People stop using NFT in your name, you will have no protection. And this is not advice, but it's going to be hard to be like, we're NFTFi and you're NFTX. We're going to sue you for using our name. Like, no, that's going to be a tough one. But to echo what Evan is saying in terms of like these new types of decentralized financial products that are enabled or augmented by NFTs, really exciting space, right? So he alluded to loans, which I think form another like price discovery mechanism where people are able to, accept offers or provide an offer of a loan with the NFT as being a collateral, and a smart contract is going to automate the settlement of that transaction. So that falls within the scope of decentralized finance, and also helps, with price discovery. But also in a way, it ideally helps with price discovery. But I think nefarious actors might, find a lot of creative ways to make a lot of money and to do a lot of things with money that aren't necessarily allowed. So you kind of have like the pros and cons of both, but that's just kind of the way the crypto world works. I think what's particularly exciting with respect to NFTs and DeFi in particular is the theoretical ability for people to start like staking personal tokens in association with their works, and start to like give out their personal tokens in association with NFT transfers and NFT activities. So now you're kind of like staking somebody else's credit to their own works as kind of like this representation of commitment or whatever. And you can see the same exact type of AMM activity with those tokens that are just social tokens. So that could be kind of like the next wave of this space. But it's particularly compelling because I think that there's no better coordination between, a regular ERC20 token and an NFT than the social token / creator paradigm, where because now you're able to kind of see, what somebody's personal token is trading for, and then able to kind of map that onto like the value of their NFTs. And there could even be kind of an actual like programmatic connection between social tokens and the pricing of NFTs. And that kind of, I guess, technically out of the realm of DeFi in a way, but it's nevertheless a financial product on a decentralized network. So, and I think it's an exciting space, and I hope to see more out of it. Although from my impression of the personal token market, there's somewhat of a struggle in the administration of it. It seems like a lot of work and not necessarily a promise. But yeah.
Sure, that's very interesting as well. Yeah, so that's cool. I mean, I think the idea of even sharding, like in Niftex, for example, sharding a very valuable NFT onto into multiple parts, that relates to the idea we were talking about earlier, where artists can split up the royalties of a song very easily in a contract. I really think the composability of all of this is really the power in it, because there's multiple ways to get to the same solution here. Not that there's just so many parts that all work together. So, given that, what do you think? What do you think needs to happen for the general public to utilize the power of these technologies? I know this is a broader question than just NFTs, but I want to hear your perspective on it.
I think that folks are asking for some sort of a chain of frame solution. I'm not sure if it's going to be through Google Glasses or Apple Glasses or some other type of mechanism to interact with NFTs. Not sure if it's just, a simple application. It's a phone app that, has a social aspect to it. But yeah, I think that folks are asking, like, how do we display them? How do we interact with, NFTs, seeing as though, the Web3 still has a bit of a friction for onboarding and transferring those assets outside of wallets.
That's a great point. I think that's a very unexplored area as well. The physical connection to the real world, quote unquote, even if it's registered and its rarity is proven online, let people want to feel and hold real objects or interact with something that's exciting. So that's a good point as well. And maybe things like NFTs and games may drive people into the blockchain space, and they might through NFT things as well. But yeah, Amelia, do you have a point on that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Emilio.
No, complete your thought, Casimir.
Oh, I was just mentioning that, there still is a bit of a pushback from, large gaming studios in order to implement blockchain and NFTs due to their, infrastructure being such that their silo allows them to, completely control their economy. And then there's also some pushback in terms of, the transferring of those assets art-wise within games, that maybe like a crypto voxels or Minecraft going into, a completely different, World of Warcraft or Fortnite environment that, differs quite much from, the artistic perspective of a particular gaming, and also the intellectual property concerns that comes along with the interoperability and exchange of those assets, even though, you think you might be owning those assets within a game, you're actually just leasing it from the game company. So you don't actually own the asset, in fact.
Sure. And one thing on that point as well is, I mean, eventually the gaming titans will have to relax, and let it happen, right? I think once we start allowing the community to be able to engage in this process and actually get rewarded for their engagement, like maybe it's a community-driven project to put Fortnite skins into a like Call of Duty type game. Those Rosetta Stones can be created by the community, and the community members who do that can be rewarded through crypto.
I think it would have to be something like that. I think it would have to be some sort of a decentralized mechanism, because, you know, from the talks I've been in on Clubhouse, there's there's this much disagreement in terms of the intellectual property concerns and all other sorts of ramification in terms of, you know, blockchain and decentralized finance being utilized for gameplay in different regions of the world.
Yeah, most definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would echo those intellectual property concerns, and kind of as Ayush had mentioned, that everybody just has to relax and let the actual user own the content, which is like a little bit hard for, you know, the institution to reconcile with, because it's truly as easy as just putting in writing, like, you don't own shit and we own everything, and, you know, it's that easy. But I think that, you know, with the market mechanics afforded by today's technology, like, we're going to start to see a big shift in saying, all right, like, maybe you don't own it, you don't need to own it, but we might create an incentive structure that rewards you if you promote it. And so hopefully users will be able to capture the value appreciation of their own endeavors through participation in any of these virtual worlds. But on the intellectual property side in general, I think what's particularly exciting, in contrast to just like a written license agreement, is where you start to attach NFTs that function as a license, that are associated with with like an art piece. So for example, like imagining a scenario where I'm a digital artist and I create a work and I sell that NFT, but that NFT also has attached to it an offer to anyone in the world that wants to use that in a virtual world, or wants to rent that work and in a virtual world for a period of time. And then a user could conceivably specify maximums and all types of parameters around that. Like, there's only going to be a permitted display of up to 10 hours every 3 months on these platforms. And like, you start to kind of create a market for just access to works, which of course requires kind of a top-down interoperability between these worlds and potentially hardware devices. But it's an exciting idea, and I think one that is going to get us closer to the real-time, licensing environment that we're all kind of hoping for in this metaverse. And I'm hoping that, you know, the metaverse avoids the problems of the meat space, in that, you know, it's not just going to permit the rampant infringement, and where infringement occurs, it's hopefully going to be captured by some type of like economic system that still provides some type of recognition to owners. So whether that's through a native token or through fiat currency or otherwise. So I'm really hoping to see a dynamic license market emerge associated with NFTs. And I think that'd be like a really cool area and intersection of IP and blockchain.
I absolutely agree with you there. I think that's something I'm personally very excited about as well. I'd love to talk with you more about that later too. And anyone else, of course, who was invited to the networking session after this event. So stick around and chat. So it's 5:11. I did promise the folks in the audience that I would answer some of their questions. I think we did a pretty good job of interweaving it in, but some of them are missing. So Saif is asking, how do you envision that NFTs could revolutionize politics?
Do I have to answer because I'm the attorney? Anyone else got a take on this?
I have those stickers. I voted. You know,
yeah.
Be a badge. You know, you voted. You know, you post your vote on the blockchain. It's registered. You don't have to count it again because it's already been posted, and then you get a nice NFT badge.
That's actually nice. I like that idea. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And then another question from Fanny is, maybe we have reached the point of enough volume and liquidity to stop curation. This relates back to our centralized curation conversation. So that's supposed to be a temporary solution. Do you think at this point we can rely on peer-to-peer solutions for deciding what is hot or not?
I think to some extent, yes, but I think that it'll initially come out in like a tiered hierarchy of preferred curators in order to kind of like ensure that you're getting good data, because like people aren't necessarily good art curators, right? Like there could be a person who can click on 10 out of 20 works and they're all the worst works that they could have picked, and then you have that data into the system. Now, of course, you're always able to downstream track which users are contributing to that data, and then you can like try to understand which data is good data and which data is bad data. But I kind of see kind of like a hierarchical a curation approach, which is kind of like something like Flamingo DAO is up to, which is exciting. But we'll see how it plays out. It'd be great if curation mechanics were completely on chain. Then you would have like a real-time view as to which works are preferred over other works, but I don't anticipate it'll be executed quite like that.
Yeah, I think taste making could be, tokenized in a TCR, like a token curated registry, and folks could essentially be compensated for their taste. And I think that there is a certain element of curation that is necessary in order to be not only just profitable or sustainable as a project or as a marketplace. I know, some of the community talks about how it's very easy for Rarible folks to mint on Rarible, but sometimes, there's not a lot of collectors on Rarible because there isn't much curation effect. I think overall, there needs to be I guess like an even keel of, community or peer review type systems in place that isn't just, completely hierarchical, like a Nifty Gateway or
a small Wi-Fi issue. Yeah. Okay, apologies, Casimir. I'm just going to move on. So one last question before we end it is, other platforms besides Ethereum that y'all are looking at for the NFT ecosystem?
I'm really excited about Cosmos, and I have worked on Cosmos SDK for Ethermint during the hackathon. Really excited about Binance Smart Chain. And also this is another one. It used to be called Blockstack. I'm not sure if they still have the same name. Yeah, you can build applications on top of Bitcoin's blockchain.
Yeah, Cosmos is a Berkeley-based company, so their office is right on Shattuck. So we love them.
Nice. I'll just add, I think layer 2s for Ethereum are definitely a lot more mature than they were a year ago. You now have like production-ready things like Matic, projects deployed, NFTs live, and then you have roll-ups kind of coming down the line as well. So I'm excited to see how those play out. But then also on sort of the more mainnet side of things, you got Flow, you have Tezos, you have Cosmos, Polkadot, all of these sort of Cambrian explosion of new blockchains. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what new applications people build on higher throughput environments. So I think that'll probably be a big theme for 2021, for 2022. I think maybe 2021 still might be kind of Ethereum, but I guess already Flow has started to take off too. So maybe it'll happen this year. But
yeah, that's true. Flow is unique also because they have their own IP. And Emilio, actually, this might be. I'm curious what you think about this, but the Flow company, Dapper Labs, has IP partnerships with NBA and Cardi B and other things like that. So that's its own approach to this as well, which could be very cool for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to leverage the social force of things that are already famous into the blockchain, I guess that's a win. But there's some pushback there, I think, ideologically. But yeah, like having a license release from the NBA, as in the case of Top Shop, is obviously a value proposition to people who don't know anything about NFTs other than NBA Top Shot exists, and I want to make money. So they're capturing a lot of that, but I guess we'll kind of see in the long-term sense what happens there. I'm not really familiar, like, or too familiar with the technical advantages of other chains exploring with NFTs. Yeah, I know like certain chains are developing a near protocol. You have a Matic too, are the ones that I've heard a lot. I guess my intuition is in line with Devin's here, that I think 2021 will still be an Ethereum focused world. That's just because the notoriety of the creators there is just so high right now, and getting so much attention. As of course with the recent news about Beeple's auction on Christie's, which is exciting for the space. So I think people are really excited about Ethereum there. But although I will say, I was on a Clubhouse talk today with Beeple and the people at Christie's, and they were talking about the auction, and they were like, oh, are they going to accept Ethereum? And they were like, well, we're thinking about it. And I was just kind of like blown away. I'm like, you're not even like, that's not on the table already. Like, it's coming up in what, like 10 days? Like, I would think that they're missing out on a lot of money if they're not accepting Ethereum. So I was a little bit perplexed by that, which is kind of like an interesting thing. I was surprised. I'm wondering if anyone else here has any take on why they wouldn't want to accept Ethereum, or at least make the option available.
It's interesting. I mean, I think some platforms might want to avoid having Ethereum kind of monopolize the smart contract layer for blockchains, but that's all I can think of. Looks like we're almost out of time. Cameron's popped in.
Yeah, Casimir, what were you going to say?
Oh, my thought off the top of my head was just the volatility, right? So, if somebody struck the hammer, and I don't know Christie's, terms of service, but whatever, probably needs to transact in a stable coin is my thought.
It makes sense, but it seems they could have figured it out.
Devin, any last thoughts?
Yeah.
Cool. You can take it away.
I'll close it up. So it was really, really great to talk to all of you. Hope you all enjoyed this panel. We definitely talked about a variety of things, definitely opened my mind on how NFTs can be used and the power behind them and what's to come for the future. So really, really appreciate all of you who stayed and listened to us chat about it. Follow all these folks on Twitter. They are so legit. They're so dope. Shout them out and keep them in your thoughts.
Thanks, Emilio. Thanks, Devin.
Yep. Thanks so much.